Right. This is the OpenChain monthly meeting for spec, education, and more. It's sort of a busy time for us, even though the holidays are coming in, because we've had some elections and whatnot, and things have moved around in a positive way. Let's start with the antitrust policy notice, though, which is what we always do. As always, this meeting is under the LF antitrust policy. Full policy available on the LF website. And if you're from a member company, you can ask questions of our counsel, Andy Updegrove. Past that formality, we have quite a few little action items this month. We had the North America Europe call last week or so. And that call went through some of the key things that have happened. We're going to revisit them a bit and talk about new things. There's a lot to do, from formally welcoming our newly elected chairs through to official votes of the steering committee and various things. Okay, let's do the first bit first. We have had community elections for specification, education, and telco. The results of the elections are that Chris of Lockheed will be taking his fourth term as spec chair. Martin of First Light Fusion is going to be popping up with his first term as education chair. He's taking over from Andrew, who's also on this call. Huge credit to Andrew for his guidance till now. And Martin, don't mess it up. And finally, um, we have Mark Eton entering his third term as telco chair. So it's just fantastic to have the community elections done. That's a very important part of sustainability for us. Now, Martin, with your permission, is it okay if I drive through the education slides that you previously had?
Yes, thanks, Shane. Thanks for putting some pressure onto me. I guess just to introduce myself for anybody who hasn't come across me before, then I've been working on open source license compliance things for around 10 years or so. Firstly with Cisco as an open source specialist, and I've been involved in the education work group and open chains for about 6 years, I think. So pretty much everything that's been we'll talk about today and has been done in that time, I have at least reviewed and some of it has been created by me. So we're looking forward to standing on the shoulders of giants of Andrew and the previous chairs and getting on with it.
And I must say, Martin, the things you've done have been remarkable. For instance, the intro video series, just as one example, which was a significant bit of work, recording a ton of videos explaining various things about OpenChain, about license compliance, the whole lot. So it's very exciting for you to have this role. And I believe the year ahead is looking busy. We have four slides, and perhaps I'll flash them on the screen and then you can walk through them and tell me the speed. So the first one is about basic next steps, then training courses and materials, online first, then our stuff on the GitHub, and then specific actions. So, let me know when I should change slides. Let me know what you want to say about them.
So, yeah, something that's being pushed by our general manager, whoever that is updates to our online training courses. Um, but actually, firstly, I'd say like basically there's nothing wrong with them, in my opinion. They are actually very well rated, 4.5 stars out of 5, 4.6 stars out of 5. But of course, that doesn't mean that there's no room for improvement at all. So I think it is worth having a bit of a look at them and refresh. So I'll say a bit more about that on the next slide. But yeah, in terms of the other two items mentioned on here, there's the open source policy template, which was recently updated and uploaded. And of course, the maturity capability model, which was one of the main focuses of the work for the last year or so. And I think actually we can use both of these things to kind of bring together a whole kind of more a coherent story. So, for example, where the policy template and the capability model can also point to training and other materials that help people to be able to improve, and kind of works as a nice, lovely feedback circle for improvement. So that's kind of my vision, if you like, for some of this work. So if we can move to the next slide, then please. Yeah, so I took a hit for the team and I actually redid the LFC 193 and 194 Linux Foundation hosted courses. And I'm glad to say that I passed the tests at the end as well. So I'm still quite happy about that. I say generally that as far as I'm concerned, they're still very good. They still get all of the key things across. Um, but again, so I think it's worth checking for any improvements. So for example, for 193, then in some places there are links to Wikipedia content, for example, for incompatible licenses or license compatibility. But then again, some of the licenses, such as like MIT, is just first, it's not introduced, it just says, for example, MIT. So perhaps putting in some links when the things first come up is probably useful, but that's just one possible suggestion. For the 194 course, then a couple of things that I noted. Firstly, that, yeah, this link to this automatecompliance.org, this website does still exist and does talk about tools, but it doesn't seem very active. Nothing's happened on that website for a year or more. So it seems a bit kind of a bit strange pointing to that rather than, for example, the OpenChain tooling working group. But I think that probably just needs a discussion and decide whether we update that or not. I also found there was also a broken link where I think it's supposed to be pointing to the developer guideline single page, but that link is broken. I think it's moved on GitHub, but to where I'm not sure. But I'm sure we can get that fixed pretty easily. Okay, Shane, can you move to the next slide, please? So at the moment, the training course content is on GitHub, but it's not in a markdown format. In fact, the 194 course document also includes track changes and comments, which appear that they have not ever been accepted and reflected back to the 194 course. So that's something that we should probably look at first. These are comments mainly by Mary Hardy of Microsoft, I think. So that's what we should probably do to get going. And yeah, there were also some changes to the training slides, and maybe those improvements can be reflected back to the training course content as well. At least they should be consistent as much as we can possibly make it. And yeah, at the moment we only have English and Italian, strangely, for the training slides. So it'd be great if we can have some more language translations for these. So that'd be great if people can help and contribute and move things forward. Can I go to the last slide, please? Yeah, so here are some specific actions, unfortunately, mainly for me. So firstly, to engage with the Linux Foundation education people and see if they have any suggestions for improvements. Maybe their platform supports more interactive content or some other features that we can actually now use which weren't available before, or maybe there's some other comments they've had which haven't been reflected in the L5 markings or the comments that you can put in. Also check in with people such as Continental, who are using the training as part of their open source program, and see if they have any comments or suggestions. And of course, put this all out for a wider education input and work through to improvement. I think that's it from me for today, unless there are any questions.
Brilliant. And while people mull over what they've just heard, I just threw a link into the chat if people are not on the education work group list and want to join in on that mailing list as well. Just one question, I suppose, on my side, if that's okay. Um, Linux Foundation education team. I'm going to help with that, of course. Um, do you think we should run a survey about the courses on social media and whatnot? We have a couple of options. One is to go through education and their processes, or we could also, dive into our network and do a quick survey. And would that be something you'd find useful that we could do ahead of our next meeting?
I did think about whether we could do that, even if it was just doing a LinkedIn post and ask, have you done the course? Do you have any comments? Rather than a specific, um, survey.
Right.
Um, it'd be interesting to see if anybody actually gives any comments. I guess my fear is that there's a good chance that nobody will give any comments, which maybe isn't a bad thing. But yeah, I think that's worth doing at some point. I guess I wasn't sure myself whether the timing should be after getting some other feedback. So for
Yeah.
example, to encourage other feedback, if you see what I mean, so they could say, "Oh, have you done this course?" One comment we've had is X, another one Y. Do you have any further comments? But
Right.
but I'm pretty easy with that. Maybe we'll take it offline, just make a decision and go with it, perhaps in what would
Of
be an
course.
otherwise quiet open chain outreach kind of LinkedIn moment, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And just so you know, this is jumping ahead. We'll come back to it in a minute. I'm trying to put together a survey based on Chris's feedback, a survey about spec things. And I'm actually struggling to get feedback on what questions are good for people. Now, I know you've given feedback, which will be incorporated in the next cycle. So yeah, we're sort of both in the survey mood, but also it's a difficult to make a good survey. So yeah, something to mull over.
Yeah,
Anywho.
I think if it's something on LinkedIn, if it's an easy yes no question, then
Yeah.
that's kind of good on a specific point. I think you're more
Right.
likely to get engagement in it because it takes no time, right? It's like you've read the post anyway. Just clicking yes or no or something is really simple. Whereas I
Yeah.
suspect people, even if it's only 10 questions, will feel like, okay, that's perhaps a bit too much effort for me. But
Good point. And you know what? Maybe we can just do short surveys to just get the general direction and take it from there.
yeah, yeah. And I guess for the education boosters, probably doing them separately is a good idea as well.
Yeah. Right. Brilliant. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah.
Um, Next bit, is that all right? Yeah. Okay, next bit. AI. AI has been doing a lot of exciting things. Now, Dave is in the wrong time zone, and Matthew has gone on sabbatical. So our two co-chairs are currently in hiding or asleep. So I'm going to do this bit. The AI work group has been terrifically busy working on a draft AI compliance guide for the supply chain. It's about AI system bill of materials, about how to deal with all the suppliers now saying that everything is AI. So everyone is doing everything in AI. What are the questions I need to ask for a trusted supply chain? Good news. The draft guide is pretty much done, and we're in a public comment period for it. Public comments are open until just after mid-August. So it's a 6-week comment period. You don't have to read all of this text. The slides will be available later on the website. But the short version is this stuff is online, putting the link into the chat, and you can go there, have a look at it, and leave a comment as a GitHub issue if you so wish. And if you don't so wish, you you can at that link find out how to join the AI mailing list and leave a comment there. The reason all of this is important is because AI compliance has become a very critical part of risk management in open source. We're seeing more and more open source and open source adjacent AI. Just one example, about 2 weeks ago, we had Minimax 1 come out of China. Open source end to end, the whole thing. Um, And who knows where that model and its data sets and its parameters and its weights will go. So we need to know what to ask in the supply chain, and this guide, using the experience of ISO 5230, using the experience of ISO 18974, using all the experience we've built over 8 years, this guide encapsulates it for that optic. Now, it's not a standard, it's a guide, but it is using the type of approach and the type of knowledge we've applied before. And it's intended to complement all those other things out there, like the SPDX bill of materials for AI, or the OSI definition of OpenAI, or the LFAI and data model openness framework. Whatever people are looking at, this is designed to help complement all of that. It's about the processes, the policy, the training, the responsibility. Please do pass the word. This public comment period is very important because we want to make sure that people can genuinely be aware of this and share their notes before we go and change from a draft into a published guide. Right. That's that on that. But do you have any questions? I mean, we've been running the AI work group since early 2024. It started as a study group, then became a work group late last year, completed this guide, and is in this advanced cycle. But it doesn't mean that you have to have been fully aware of it or that you have to know about this guide. So any questions are most welcome. Right. Well, if there's no questions, then I'll let you know that we will keep talking about the public comment period. You'll keep seeing it on places like LinkedIn. But after the 18th of August, this document will be out of public comments and will probably be published at the end of August as a version 1.0. Right. Not the only exciting thing going on. Spec. So, for those of you who are long-term here and also extremely patient souls, we were busy with a 2-year comment period looking at our ISO standards, and then a 6-month, sorry, a 2-year editing period, my apologies, looking at our existing ISO standards. And then a 6-month public comment period, and then a 3-month freeze period, capturing community ideas for further developing them. All of that ended up with proposals for updating the ISO standards going towards our steering committee, which had a meeting on the 25th of June. Now, they were looking at two things. One was administrative. One was an ISO periodic review about ISO 5230. That is a periodic review. It's not about editing the standard or anything like that. It's about confirming the existing thing is used in the market and is useful. And the steering committee formally voted to let ISO know that that is the case. The second item relates to that spec editing thing. Community proposed updates to both ISO 5230 and ISO 18974. And like I said, we went through a very formal community process on this, and we came up with some changes. The changes are in these slides. I'm not going to walk through them in detail, but basically there were 5 changes to ISO 5230, 4 changes to ISO 18974. The main change, the most impactful change, is changing the review period to reconfirm conformance from 18 months to 12 months. In other words, from an 18-month cycle of double checking if you meet the requirements of the standard to a 12-month or annual cycle. Specifically, the changes are available. We have the current ISO standard, the draft next gen online. And we're not going to walk through these slides in detail. I'm just showing them on the screen so people can freeze the video if they so wish. Reordering things to make it easier to read, fixing language to make it easier to understand, making sure that advances in the market, like SPDX isn't alone anymore. There's lots of uh, SBOM discussion addressing that. Uh, Trying to make sure that language is inclusive, for instance, not just for companies, but for governments and non-commercial entities. And then, of course, the renewal period. 5 things for ISO 5230. And much the same story for ISO 18974. Current ISO standard on GitHub. Next gen on GitHub. All the issues we've closed, viewable on GitHub. The changes are basically language to make things much easier to understand when you read it, or at least easier. Making sure that the way we describe things more accurately captures our intent. That's partially about second language speakers, including things like examples. So, for instance, in one case, we talked about known vulnerabilities, and people might say, how do I assign a risk to a known vulnerability? And there's a way to do that. There's a particular thing, so we reference that, right? So nice ways to approach this. And of course, the duration change. Long story short, the the changes were approved by the steering committee, and they're planning to go live with the new versions of the ISO standards in 2026. Right. So no surprises. We've had over 2 years of this process. We've had 9 months of it being frozen. And we have a timeline for deployment to market. Your work is approved. It's going out. Well done on you. And oh, singing, I think you're unmuted. Would it be okay to mute? There's some background. Thank you. Right. That's good. That's nice. That's excellent. Mostly it's a validation that the community can, does, and will effectively edit ISO standards in a completely open way. It's a validation of our processes to have that captured, centralized, and approved by a committee, and a validation of our cooperation with JDF in preparing to move into ISO for those updates. Now, this goes beyond OpenChain. What we've done here is blazed a trail. We're the first project to do this. So our experience, our knowledge, our methodology will have an impact far beyond just the OpenChain project and far beyond just the Linux Foundation. So that's nice. Now, uh, yes. Related to this, Chris said, I'd like to talk about the next round of editing. What happens next? What do we edit next on our existing ISO standards? The answer from the community might be nothing, ever. They're perfect. The answer might be we have lots of ideas. Most likely it'll be somewhere in the middle. And Chris said, let's do a survey. We went through one editing cycle. We know those updates will be going live sometime in 2026. Uh, let's begin the next editing cycle and build a future. But the survey to do so is very much to be determined. So we have to decide how many questions and what are we asking. Short version, we want to say, did you see any holes in ISO 5230 or any holes in ISO 18974? Is there anything that disconnects between the two standards that makes adoption slow? So we're going to noodle on these questions, and your help would be deeply appreciated. Just pausing there. Does anyone have any questions about either the rather cool conclusion of the entire ISO update editing process or the survey? Martin.
Yeah, so the new standard becomes live sometime in 2026. I assume we will probably have some amount of notice before that actually happening. So my understanding is going to be partly a new document or stroke standard number. And I guess it will also have a updated conformance questionnaire, etc. So I guess my question is, what do you do in the meantime in terms
Yep.
of communication stroke education leading up to that and afterwards? For example, do we need an explainer for helping people just to, and as you've kind of nicely gone through, there's a few things which have changed and really is the reconfirmation period. It's probably good to explain that and explain what has changed and why. So I'm kind of interested in what the plans are around that,
Absolutely.
partly from a communication stroke
Yes.
education perspective. And I guess my last comment on this particular survey is, yeah, I'd recommend splitting it into two because the answers for one of the specs may be different than the other spec, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Everything you've said is super important. And, okay, so I want to address some of this. First of all, yes. Uh, Before we go to a wider audience and set actual dates for submission to ISO for update, and then we communicate with ISO on the specific date they'll publish, we will communicate widely a few things. First of all, we'll communicate all of the process we've done and what's changing. Second of all, we'll communicate that when the updates come out, it it doesn't matter if you don't want to use them. You know, people can still use the old ISO standard. Now, ISO itself will mark the old ones as superseded by the new one. But in practice, that doesn't mean the old one is gone. So there'll be no immediate impact on the procurement cycle for companies. And we do regard that as important because many companies are in long-term procurement cycles. It takes years to update a procurement cycle. So the new standards will have some tweaks and adjustments. They will come out sometime in 2026, but from our perspective as OpenChain and our messaging, they will be optional. It's a case of here are improvements the community sees, and you may want to include them in your supply chain. From our perspective, nothing is on fire, nothing needs to be changed because of a flaw. Rather, the suggested changes are about improvements. So that's one communication that we'll spend a lot of time building. Another communication is we've heard from Joint Development Foundation, and of course, we're reconfirming this again, but we've heard from them that with a, a term change to the ISO standard, so for instance, changing the dates, moving language around, uh, changing how things are described, with that type of change, they told us that the ISO number itself will iterate, not just 5230 colon year. Right now it's 5230 2020. It won't be 5230 colon 2026. They said the ISO number will iterate. Now we've asked them to clarify and reconfirm that, but it does mean that we might be messaging to people that the old one, 5230, is still valid, and that the new one, the next generation of 5230, will have a new ISO number. Okay, so we're working on clarifying that, and that might be part of the communication as well. But we certainly will take steps, and the steering committee was pretty clear that one reason they want to do it in 2026 is principle of least surprise. The changes will be very carefully described. Explainers, absolutely. The fact that it's essentially optional, people can take their time transitioning, will be explained. The fact that already conformant organizations can switch to the new updated standard immediately. The only thing really for them is changing the frequency of double checking conformance will be communicated. And conformance online, hosted by us, will be available for the old and new versions of the standards uh, moving forward. I hope that addresses it. But yeah, a lot of pre-communication, a lot of discussion, and a lot of finding out any uncertainties with you, with this community, as we go wider and wider. talking about this. Ooh, something exciting. I'm assuming that no one has a question about that spec stuff. If they did, they're super welcome to raise it. But if they didn't, the exciting thing that's just coming up is that Marcel has dialed in, and that suggests that hey, we now are going to have a little bit of a preview of the SPDX operations profile, which has been underway for a while. Is that correct, Marcel?
That's unfortunately correct.
I got you. You're trapped.
Yeah. So I also have a slide about our journey.
I'll
So
switch off so you can do it.
okay, then let me see if I can figure out how to share the right screen and the right stuff. But this share, you're sharing.
Perfect.
Am I sharing something?
Yep, I can see the normal PowerPoint screen. So
Okay, great. So yeah, hello all. Shane asked me if I could give an update. So and that's handy because yesterday Matthew had to give an update in the tech call, and now version 3.1 release candidate shall be compiled in the next days. So this just as a apology upfront why we're not more progressed, but to give you a yeah, an insight. I don't know how many minutes I will have. I just would go through this and then you can ask questions later. So um, we looked when we started, we had version 2x something that was really still a mere file format, right? SPDX as a file format. So I share an ASBOM and then has this file format. And when we looked at that, we said, okay, we have some cases, and I will show this a little bit more in detail later, where the information that we get from the bill of material is cool, right? But not enough, right? Because for specific cases, we would need more information. And this was also where we approached the SPDX team and said, okay, would there be a possibility also to add additional data, metadata into the profile? Not, and that's important, we had not in mind to have this as an additional exchange information that would be exchanged downstream the supply chain, but it was more the idea, okay, that is information that we need to handle for our supply chain risk management topics, etc., internally to do assessments, etc. And our original idea was, okay, we need that metadata, but we would not share it. But for the sake of having a standardization for open source tooling and other tooling, it would be good to have this also standardized. Then Kate, she said, okay, yeah, no issue. By the way, Marcel, there's Matthew and there's Umo. They had the same idea, sit together and talk about it. And Umo and Matthew, they had more this export control use case in mind. I had others in mind. And so this is how we came together. But this is important to understand that you do not have the expectation, okay, all those fields that you now define, you mean to hand over then through the supply chain? No, it was the idea to have it in there for the sake of having this tools interface standardization. But nevertheless, we didn't exclude the possibility that some of those portions may also end up in a formal handover document, like for example the export control number at the end. So it was not the main motivation, but we didn't exclude that some of this information could go that direction. And so as now the world turns and turns, next to our idea, there was this switch to version 3.0. And for those of you who know already the 3.0 concept a little, that this is not any longer a mere file format, but you have already this concept of profiles. So that we have now also the AI profile, this data set profile. We will have now a hardware profile, safety profile, so where you can also have dedicated profiles for dedicated parts, and therefore we got this operations profile. And here, this is the summary that we had to do. So operations profile defines fields for describing the business context of the software that cannot not or not yet be directly extracted from the source repository. So we need a second source of metadata that we can use later. So just as an example, if you have a repository that contains your code, you cannot see, okay, this code will lead to this application and this application will be shipped then to this and that country. You cannot see that from the repository, right? So therefore you need, typically you have that in your company, in your organizations, you have that information at some place, right? But the one has it in Excel, the next one SAP, the next one in whatever, and potentially also in different formats. And that would be then a blocker for ideally automating those things. And then here you can also read the intention of the operations profile, blah, 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 just to summarize what I just said. Then, as Shane diplomatically formulated it, so it's around for some time, and that has also, well, there was an evolution also in the SPDX. So when we started in Bilbao in 2023, we thought, okay, we just make an Excel with our fields, and then we check if there's already an overlap with existing fields, and then also the mode and the development method within SPDX evolved. So we switched into PowerPoint, JSON, Mermaid. So we have all of this, and next to that, we try to also figure out, okay, what is the content that we should have. Point number one. So we learned a lot in this journey, and also that there we have a very specific profile, right? Because typically an SBOM, you have an SBOM for something that you ship. Yeah. So with this supply chain perspective, in our case, as we would use that internally sometimes, so we would also have different lifecycle states, right? So for example, and that could also work for other parts in when you say you initiate a new product, where you plan in the beginning in initiation to have, well, those dependencies. Here's you base that on an open source stack. Here you buy something from a supplier, something like that. But while development, you would potentially come to another conclusion and make different architecture decisions, so that along the way, the information also in your data set or in your metadata in the operations profile might change, right? In the beginning, you will say, okay, we only have that customer in that country, but then there are new interested parties from other countries, and then also you need to take that into account. And second, beyond export control, we then also thought about, okay, yeah, there might also be interesting to have an obligation assessment, also contribution assessment. So this also, grew over the years and or months. Yeah, years is, yeah, we're second year now. And now, as I said, there was also the hardware profile starting activities. And here we had a longer discussion beginning of the year, because they said, well, as they only heard operations profile, they said, yeah, okay, cool. Then what do you mean with operations? So we had longer discussion and finally came up to this point where we said, okay, we cannot just call it operations, but we need to distinguish between technical operations and business operations, where we started with, right? So, and to make this more transparent, so that we say from a business operations side, we only care about the system, we don't care about what's inside, and want to describe the business context in the business environment. Whereas, yeah, as you can see here, on the hardware, and this was the hardware profile mainly triggering this aspect. So for technical operations, you look at software, hardware, network, and also the physical context. At the end, I can tell you, there's also now the SPX from the beginning when we started with that until now made a huge evolution. For me now, this is much more than just a file format. I would say it's rather a meta model that we have now. And also there are some groups that really try, like the hardware profile group, to make this as holistic as possible to really enable someone to describe a system in a complete way, right? They also said, okay, yeah, but then we need to check, well, how far away are we then from a digital twin in case of hardware and so on? But these are discussions that are currently ongoing. But with this step here where we said, okay, now we refined our scope for business operations, okay, we will only focus on the left side. This was also helpful, but also took some time, right? But helped us also to be more clear what business processes would we address, like, okay, value adding processes, supporting processes. This is not a complete list, but just to give an idea where the process profile metadata could be used. As I said, not only at the edges of the supply chain interfaces, but also internally. Then also what types of business operations would we see here? And this is also the last discussion that we had. Okay, is assessment then not something that is an action and so on? So a lot of also content-wise discussions, but for now you can say, okay, we had this upstream, downstream, inbound, outbound assessments in mind that could work. Then also yeah, and that's, I think, also overlapping with the discussions we had in OpenChain. Say, okay, export control, license compliance, obligation fulfillment. This is more about, if we can group that together, would be non-functional requirements assessments. And then I don't know if upstream contribution assessment is also something that would fit into this one, but yeah, for now we have it separate. And here, just to finish this, also for risk management, what's the idea for compliance? To have the audit trail and automated checks enabled. And yeah, this is also from the original activity. Ideally, if we want to automate as much as we can, then we need data and we need to have a standardized format to make that happen. And this also interesting discussion when we said, okay, we just define for the fields that we need for an export control assessment, then directly the next ideas came up as like, hey, can we then have an automated creation calculation of the export control number, things like that. So there, I think that could spark a lot of other ideas and follow-ups. But first of all, we need to really yeah, make this more comprehensible, what we try to do here, right? And come to a point where we can also explain that, like today. And this is also a learning that we had, and finally came to the point that if we try to explain it, it was always very hard without having an example, especially now also with the complexity that comes with the model development per se, right? Like we only had this JSON, as I showed, right? This Excel file and JSON file. So if you merely have a list of fields, then, well, hard to explain. Then now we have a draw IO model where you can also see then the relations between the fields and classes and properties, and also the relation between different profiles. And that was also very handy because we said, okay, if several profiles need same value metadata values, right, then we could then also put them in the core profile, right? Because then anyone can use this. So we had discussion on that end. But at the end, what really would count also to make this more tangible is then that we have examples. And that is what we are currently working on. So that you can see the operations type that we had in mind. So inbound, outbound assessment, contribution, obligation fulfillment, export control assessment. There might be more, but to start with, we said, okay, now for export control assessment, to make that also easier to explain, ideally we would have an example that would be based on the operation profile already. We can really have everything in place and then also do some, kind of proof of concept slash quality assurance that what we try to reach with our thing, there's an example and we can use that example to look, does the current profile that we provide also cover that. And that is now here. We could go into detail, but this is just some screenshots. So for the contribution assessment, but I think here's the export control assessment. This is where it's really currently work in progress. So here, this would be the draw.io model. You can see, okay, these are the parts of our operations profile that would be relevant for the export control assessment. So the country, then the relationships, and what we have in here. That was very handy for the discussion. Second, then if we map from our existing markdown files where we have the classes and properties so that we really cover all the fields that we need with the existing properties. And here, this is already a learning. The third pillar that I said, okay, now we made an example. How would that look like if we fill out the current list of values? So this is not the JSON or YAML or whatever you would expect. It's just a simple text file with the list. But already this was very helpful to see, okay, if we now exercise such an export controls assessment, we would already see, hey, stop, we missed some fields that we still need to define then, or we have some unclarity, or we need to refine things like that. So also to go this loop, and this is what we do every Friday afternoon, at least in Europe, because that is we have colleagues also from the US there. It would be the Friday morning, at least for the West Coast, and so our next step, and here I didn't provide a slide, but I think there's the idea to have in 10 days, 2 weeks, something, a release candidate for version 3.1 that shall be presented. And we hope also that we, until then, will be finished at least with the lowest line here that we also started with, this control assessment, that we have the draw.io model finished and reviewed, the markdown files finished and reviews, and also the examples. So if you're interested in that and also want to collaborate, then you're welcome to join our sessions. It should be in the SPDX calendar, our meetings, and we have a Slack channel for the discussions. And we'll be very, very busy in the next days. I can tell you. And then hopefully we will be able to also contribute something for the release candidate. One, why is this release candidate important? Because there are so many new things coming in where will also help us in our operations profile. As I mentioned earlier, there are things currently in the different profiles like hardware, AI, safety, etc., that are defined there that shall be moved to the core, right? So, and that will also help us based on the new release candidate. We can then also simplify a lot of our parts in our profile, because we can then just say, okay, we do not need to reinvent that wheel here in our profile, but we can just then inherit it from a class or a property that is available in the core. So it's anyway, by nature, needs to be an iterative approach, right? So step by step, and therefore the release candidate is a very important step also for us. Okay, I didn't check if there are any chat or hands up or something like that, but that's it. So yeah, I missed to add this final slide here. We welcome contributions. So let me see if I can find a link to our community and to the meeting later that I can share it in the chat. But that was it from my side for now.
Marcel, that's amazing. And when this operations profile started, it was clear there was potential, but it wasn't clear where it would go. It's amazing to see how much ground has been covered. So huge congratulations. And naturally, we'll want to reference everything in the OpenChain material. Please shoot me along that link. I'll make sure that the recording includes links when we publish it, and let's coordinate closely on this.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the stage.
Yeah. Yeah. For those who, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with Marcel, I think everyone online is. Marcel is also one of our board members in OpenChain, so he's doing so many things. We appreciate it. And yeah, that's great. Does anyone have any questions about this operations profile at the moment? If not, don't forget that you can review the recording and ask questions through OpenChain, and we'll naturally connect you with our friends, colleagues, and collaborators at SPDX. You know what? This neatly takes us to any other business, where anyone can raise any topic. Does anyone have anything extra they'd like to talk through today? If not, I see a few people on the line who aren't always here, so I'm delighted to see them. I see SC and I think also Singing from Taiwan on the line. Are you both here? Both muted.
No. So far, so good.
Hi.
Thank you.
Great. It's good to have you here, SC. And Singing, I'm assuming that's you as well over at OCF. Great to have you on. This Europe-Asia call, I hope, will continue to grow as a bridge across the world. It's getting very important that we coordinate on all of these exciting developments. Right. The meeting is formally closed. We will see you next time. Don't forget, the AI public comment period is super important. Working with us on getting the messaging about updates to ISO standards, super important. You'll be seeing that on the spec list. Working with Martin on all the fabulous updates we've got coming for reference material, education list. Random questions, where do I go? Please help. Well, that's what I'm here for. Until then, I think I just want to say thank you to absolutely everyone, but especially to Martin and Marcel. Marcel has put some links in the chat, which I personally am opening, and I will include them on the publication of this particular chat. Ooh, Marcel has also shared his slides in the Slack channel if you want them. Bye-bye all. Have a lovely day. For those of you going on vacation, good. Send us photos. For those of you not going on vacation, well, we'll commiserate on the next call. Take care.
Thanks, Shane. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.